Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing what I've been up to in my own allotment and my own garden. Now this weekend it is of course been Easter weekend, which for many of us in the UK means we get an extra long weekend. Because Friday and Monday are bank holidays, which for many of us means a day or an extra 2 days, I should say, off work. Not for all of us, admittedly. There are some people that still have to work on these days, so they don't necessarily feel the benefit. And there's also people who never work on those days either, so for them it's just another normal day. But I think for majority of us, it is just nice to have an extra long weekend. And for me, with Easter being so late this weekend, it has meant that I can spend all weekend in the garden and in the allotment doing the things that I love doing. After all, that's what bank holidays are for, aren't they? To have some time to do the things that we love. Now, I'm recording this on Saturday the 19th of April today, and the last 2 days I have spent in the garden here at home, the kitchen garden. Yesterday I spent a lot of time just basically tidying up some areas that I wasn't happy with. The vegetable beds, I've cleared all the weeds out, which doesn't take all that long, and cutting the grass and tending to all the sort of things that I felt needed a bit of attention. Now this wasn't a job that is particularly exciting, but it was just nice to be able to spend the time being able to really concentrate and get everything to a state that I felt very, very happy with. Over the last few weeks, of course, we've been trying to get ourselves to this state. It's still a little too early to plant out many of our plants. We're getting there, it's just still that little bit too early. But once the time is right, and it's not long now, our plants will be ready. Our beds will be ready to take our plants. And that's the main thing that I've been trying to get myself to the state of, making sure that my beds are ready. That being said, my onions and my garlic are all growing well. We've got some purple sprouting broccoli that are ready for harvesting. So we've got lots of benefits that are still going on nonetheless. Now this brings me up to today, because today I have tackled a couple of really big jobs. Now I didn't actually plan to tackle either of these jobs, it just came as a bit of an idea. Amanda, my wife, is away for the week and it's just leaving me and Roxy here at home. One of the things I wanted to surprise her with, and this is not necessarily related to our kitchen garden as such, but it is something that we do use the garden for, our washing line. Now our clay soil here has a tendency to move, and what we find with the washing line, after a while it does start to lean over, and I've done a lot of things in the past to try and stop this from happening, including really good strong ground spikes, concrete. It still moves, and in fact the person that we bought this house from said it does move, it does happen here. It also happens to one of our neighbours as well, we've noticed. So this weekend, because our washing line was basically leaning over and I thought I might surprise Amanda when she gets back, I've dug a huge hole out in the garden, filled it up with postcrete and a washing line spike and stuck that into the ground. And now all we got to do is wait and see if it holds. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about a washing line when I'm talking about a vegetable garden. And for me, we use the washing line outside rather than a tumble dryer. We don't own a tumble dryer. And for me, this is something that I think the kitchen garden also has to take into account. If I had my way, every single bit of outdoor space would be used for growing food in one way or another. Unfortunately, outdoor space is not all about growing food as much as I would like it to be. We do have to take into account that it is for everyday living as well, including hanging the washing. So fingers crossed that's going to be better for us in the future. We'll keep an eye on it and see what happens. But it's also given me sort of thoughts about what we can do. If this works, it gives me an idea when we do pot in some other things in the kitchen garden that needs to go into the ground. we're going to have to look at using some really, really big amounts of postcrete in order to do that. But the next job, and this was the really big job, and I didn't plan on doing it. It's been a job that has been in the waiting room for a while. As you know, we've got 2 trees alongside the side of our garden, alongside the boundary with our neighbour's fence. An elder tree and an ash tree. And these trees were here when we moved in. And I've always liked particularly the elder tree. It's good for birds, it's good for elderflowers and elderberries. The trouble is, elder tree, it's got quite large, and because it's so close to our neighbour's fence, it's going to start causing damage to our neighbour's fence. And I spoke about this a few weeks ago. So over the last few weeks I've been taking parts of this elder tree down, which wasn't easy, but because I had extra time this weekend, I got out the ladders and I've basically cut down this elder tree right down. All we've got left now is a trunk that stands about 1.5 meters tall. That just needs now, I can get a chainsaw on it to cut that bit down. Now I was doing all this because I'm working at heights to take down this tree. I was doing this off a ladder and I was using a handsaw and loppers to cut the bits down, which worked quite well. It did take quite a while and it was hard work, but it's got that tree down safely to a size that I can now use a chainsaw to cut it down finally. Now it's a shame because I do like an elderflower. As I said, elderflower cordial is something I look forward to making every year. And what I think we will have to do with this tree, once it's completely out, it's just behind the chickens actually, I think we're going to have to plant another tree, a fruit tree, an apple tree in its place, but just a little bit further away from the fence. That way, it's not going to cause any damage. I don't know how long this elder tree and ash tree have been here, but they are quite thick, long trees. Now the ash tree, that's going to be next, another project. I'm not sure how I'm going to tackle that one because it's considerably taller and considerably thicker. But it needs to come out. In fact, it's next to my greenhouse as well, which is the other worrying side of it. So when I take that out, we've got to be incredibly careful not to damage the greenhouse. But of course, one of the other problems, the roots are lifting up our patio slabs as well. So it really does need to come out. It's just going to be a very difficult one to come out with. Anyway, that has been the last couple of days basically. The beds are completely weeded and the grass is completely cut. The tree has been cut down and hopefully I've made Amanda happy as well. One of the things that I've got to do, and I've been taking my time with this, is shred a load of the wooden branches that I've taken down from this tree. Obviously that's going to make our wood chip, which is used in our compost bins in order to make compost. But it has been a busy couple of days nonetheless, and I'm very, very happy with it once again. Right, let's find out what's been going on in the supporters club, and tomorrow I'm heading down to the allotment. Well, I'm just going to interrupt this podcast quickly and ask if you would be good enough to leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds to leave a rate and review, but it really does help us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning a bit more about how to grow their own food. It gets the algorithms working for us, get us more discovered. But not only that, this podcast is only able to continue being produced with thanks to members of our supporters club. And you could be a member too. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind the scenes podcasts that give you a bit more of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower podcast. Added to that, once a month you will also receive our monthly seed pack, and in that pack you will get a copy of our mini newspaper which gives you a few ideas of what you can be doing throughout that month, a little tick list if you like. Added to that, you also get a collection of seeds that can be sown in that very month, and I've chosen those seeds especially to be sown, vegetable seeds or edible seeds only, to be sown in that very month. Now, as an example of what seeds you could be getting, over the last week we have sown some of these seeds. We have sown some courgettes, which are always a good, reliable crop to go. And we've also sown some mustard, another very reliable but also an overlooked crop. I love mustard. We use it a lot in many dishes here at the Veg Grower Podcast. Now, if that is something you would be interested in, then please do head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to check it out and hopefully sign up. Would love to have you there. Right, let's get back to the gardening. Well, it's Easter Sunday, the 20th of April 2025 today, and you find me down on the allotment. I've spent quite a few hours down on the allotment today. Now, what I'm finding with the allotment is that it's still a little bit too early to plant anything out. We probably got to wait a couple more weeks. I will try planting things out at home before I plant things down on the allotment. The home plot is just a little bit more sheltered, which means I can get away with things a little bit earlier at the home plot compared to the allotment. But here on the allotment, not much I can really plant out, but it's been very much the running theme over the last few weeks of just getting everything ready to get plants growing, to get ready to plant out our plants. So what I did today is I came down here with one goal, and that was to start at one end of the allotment and just go right the way through my to-do list and get everything on the allotment tended to. And that's what I did. I basically started in the very top corner. I went through all my beds and just gave them all a really good weeding. Now, luckily, this doesn't take me too long. I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks trying to come down here every single day in order to remove weeds, keep up with watering, those sort of things. And it paid off because I went through all my beds and it didn't take long at all. After that, out came the strimmer and the lawnmower, and I gave all the grass paths a really big cut. Got them really tidied up, looking so much better, and I'm certainly very happy with just how the allotment looks after a really good tidy up. Now, there was a few other things that I did. What I tend to do is I always have a to-do list of what I want to do on the allotment and on the home plot. And I went through my to-do list as I'm working my way down through the allotment, and just anything that I had on the list that needed attention, I just got on and done it. And it's things like screwing in another screw into a bed to hold some wood into place, clear away some bits of wood that made an old bed, clear away some of the cardboard and things like that. Basically, everything on my to-do list that just meant that everything was tidy and ready for the growing season is done. And that's pretty much at the state we are at now. The allotment looks great. All we need is for the weather, well, the risk of frost to pass, and therefore we should be able to plant out lots of plants. I expect in the next couple of weeks that is going to happen. Now, some of the good signs I'm seeing at the moment, I've mentioned about my fruit trees and bushes being in flower in the past. Well, like the currants, we're starting to see some really lovely looking currants start to develop on those bushes, which is looking great. And I was very glad actually to get in there and clear away some of the weeds underneath it. This is in the fruit area, right at the very top of my allotment, which has been one of those problem areas that I've spoken about many times in the past. And what I did over winter was just lay down a load of cardboard to try and keep the weeds down in that area. The trouble is, the people, and I've spoken about this before, the people who neighbour my plot, well, they got evicted. They're no longer on there. But as I can tell at the moment, nobody has taken on their plot, which is a real shame. I think there are people in the pipeline, but they're going to need to really work hard to get that into any sort of shape. What is interesting, they've got a lot of apple trees and fruit trees on their plots, which just look absolutely beautiful. They're covered in weeds, but they're also covered in flowers. It's a real shame because I think that has so much potential. And the people that planted those fruit trees have missed out because, well, they're not getting the benefit of it. It seems a real shame. But, well, next people will benefit from it. The main point I think I was trying to get to there is that because they're still neighbouring my plot, it is very difficult to keep this top area tidy, keep it weed free, because of the fact that they are not tending to their plot. But the cardboard has worked. I've got to say, the cardboard has worked. It has reduced the amount of time and the amount of weeding that was spent in this area trying to keep those weeds down. I would just like it if the weeds weren't coming over from my neighbour's plot, so that we could, well, basically have a better job going on here. Broad beans are in flower, so soon we'll be getting some lovely broad beans. All my potatoes are also up. And in fact, these are two areas that I've been tending to after I've given them a weed and everything. Of course, what I've gone and done after cutting the grass too, I've taken those lawn cuttings and I've just mulched, particularly the broad beans, but also the potatoes with my lawn cuttings. This is something that I do a lot of, and over the coming weeks is something I will be doing even more of. Mulching for me is a great way of reducing weeds. And I've used lawn cuttings for many, many, many years now. I would prefer to use compost, in all honesty. I would love to be able to use compost. I just cannot get hold of enough compost or produce enough compost to really use as a mulch. It would be great on my potatoes, I'll be honest. And in fact, I might have a look in my neighbour's plot to see if there is any compost that I could use from there to mulch my potatoes instead of lawn clippings. If that is the case, that would be great. Now, ideally, what I would be doing with my potatoes actually is earthing up, which is where you just draw earth from around the potatoes up over the plants. And that's what most gardeners will do, and that's generally when growing potatoes in rows. That's not what I've done here. My potatoes are growing in blocks inside my raised bed, so I've not done them in rows, so trying to earth them up is a little tricky. However, the plan is, once these potatoes are up, these beds next year are going to be straw bale gardening, or as an experiment to see straw bale gardening, depending on how successful we are back at home with the straw bale gardening. But anyway, I've got really, the allotment is all taken care of now. It is ready for planting. All we've got to do now is get plants into the ground. And I might start that next weekend. We shall see next week. It still might be a little bit too early, but we'll see next weekend. Now, it has been quite a few hours doing this. It has been worthwhile just focusing on this for a few hours. But the weather has been warm and I think I'm a little dehydrated, so I'm going to head on home for today and get a nice cold drink. In the meantime, let's find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe, and this week we have chamula, a North African coriander-based marinade that can also be used as a dip or even a salad dressing. And I think I have said it before, but the beauty of growing your own herbs is that you can use them in abundance, something that would be expensive to do with shop bought. I used it to marinate a side of salmon for the barbecue, but it's also great with meat and vegetables. So, let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table, Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need 100 grams of fresh coriander, 40 grams of fresh parsley, 60 grams of preserved lemons, 160 millilitres of extra virgin olive oil, 4 cloves of garlic, 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, half a teaspoon of paprika and salt to taste. Method: blend all the ingredients together in a food processor or with a stick blender to a pesto type consistency. And that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, once again, another fantastic recipe from Chef Scott there. I have to admit, I do enjoy all these recipes that Chef Scott shares with us each week. I do try and cook them myself as well, and this is one that I'm definitely going to be doing, especially when we start having barbecues. Now, this brings me up to today, the 21st of April 2025, and I mentioned in yesterday's recording that I was feeling a bit dehydrated and I was coming home to have something cold to drink. I think I'd overdone it over the last weekend. Now, I say that with trepidation. I am only 43 this week. I'm not exactly old, but I will say I'm not as young as I used to be. And I certainly do find that in the past, I used to be able to go do a day's work, do a load of work in the garden or the allotment, afterwards go on a night out and still be fine the next day. At the moment, I'm not in that same sort of state anymore. I'm only 43, as I said. I'm not old by any means, but I am noticing I have to start listening to my body a bit more and just realising when things are getting a bit much. And that was certainly the case last night / this morning, because last night I had one of my awful headaches. And I put this down to the fact that I've overdone it over the weekend. Cutting the tree down, doing all the gardening work that I was doing. Don't get me wrong, I loved every minute of it. But even this morning, I woke up with an awful headache. So I decided I was going to take it a little bit easier today. And I concentrated on one job that is quite important. And that was simply taking all my plants, my young seedlings, and potting them into bigger pots where I could. Now, I began with my fruit trees and bushes that I have out in the front of my garden. These are growing quite happily out in the front, I have to say. But what I do like to do when it comes to fruit trees and bushes, I feel they need to be in as big a pot as possible. So some were in pots that might be a little bit on the small side. So we got those into bigger and bigger pots where I had them available. And then I moved on right down, working my way through all the younger plants, right through all my seedlings, getting those into bigger and bigger pots and just getting them ready to grow more roots, but also move on to the next stage. And also pricking out some of my young seedlings into individual pots where I could, and basically also sowing a few more seeds, tomatoes, courgettes, cabbages, cauliflowers, to name a few. There's a lot of seed sowing going on at the moment. Let's not forget sweet corn and beans. We're going mad for seed sowing at the moment. And that was what I concentrated on today, really, just making sure that all my plants are into bigger pots. Now, as I've mentioned a few times, we are also getting ready to start planting out our pots into their final locations. So some of my tomatoes and cucumbers and melons are going into my large autopot system in the greenhouse. They are actually planted up this weekend. But my greenhouse is primarily now for growing food, not seedlings. So my cold frames, my grow houses and my nurseries that I have outdoors, they are holding on to a lot of these other seedlings that are waiting to go into their final locations. And the ones that what I've been doing is we have to go through a stage of hardening off our plants in order to make sure they are strong enough to survive outside. And hardening off basically means getting them used to outdoor conditions. Slight bit colder for them, stronger wind, that sort of thing. When we have our young plants mollycoddled indoors, they're not really getting the true feeling of what it's like outside. So I always start my seeds off indoors. And as we move them out through, they then leave my kitchen when a couple of weeks old, I guess, and they go into my veg truck nursery that I brought a few weeks ago. They will be in there for maybe a couple of weeks before they go into the grow house. Now, my grow house has the top open, just cracked open, just slightly, but that just means they're a little bit cooler in there for the time being, just so they start getting used to cooler temperatures. I then move those plants, after about a week in that, to another cold frame that I have where the top is open a little bit more. Again, just get them used to that little bit less protection. Now, the good thing is with these cold frames, all I'm doing is cracking the lid open or lifting the lid open. If the weather predicts that we are suddenly going to get a very cold drop in temperature, I can quickly close the lid down. But after they've been in that cold frame for about a week, they then move on to another location, which is another cold frame where it doesn't have glass in the top. It's got mesh in the top. And this is just their final location before they really go out into the big, wide world. At the moment, I've actually got quite a few brassicas in this particular location. Again, this is just so they are a bit more used to the cold temperature. Now, some people might say that that sounds like a lot of work, a lot of moving around. And you're right, it is a lot of work, but I've got it down to a system. It's like a production line is the way I think of it, where I'm just moving my plants along to each location. What mini gardeners will actually do when they start hardening off, and I've done this for years as well, is instead of moving them to a different location, they would put their plants in the greenhouse overnight and then move them out every morning. So twice a day they were moving these plants. And for me, that's a lot of time that is spent. And if you forget about it for just one day, leave them out overnight, they are all dead. For me, I'm not moving them out on a daily basis. I might be moving them once a week. And that seems to work much better for me. It certainly saves a lot of time and means I can concentrate on other things. If that sounds like a lot of work to you, then let me know what you do to harden off your plants. I think that would be a very interesting way of seeing and analysing what everybody does for this rather important stage. Now, we are coming to the end of this week's podcast. Let me know what you've been up to over this Easter weekend yourself. I'm always interested to hear what you've been doing as well. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please do leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. Only takes a few seconds, but it means the world to us and helps us get found by more people who might be interested in how to grow their own food. Now, we have had a comment once again from the lovely Lynn over on Spotify, and she says this week, "Hi Richard, listening to you and this week made me think back to childhood memories of gardening. Living in a small terrace, we only had a very small garden, but I can remember bees on the lavender, picking and smelling the mint and growing a few runner beans. Eventually I realised my green dreams aged 28 when I took over my partner's allotment that he never bothered with. Consequently, I got rid of the husband and kept the allotment. Great decision, Lynn." Allotments are truly a magical place, aren't they? But that is fantastic to hear. If you've got a story like that, please do share it with us as well. Only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. If you have enjoyed this podcast and you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of our supporters club. Just £5 a month gets you access to extra behind the scenes podcasts and our seed monthly pack. Also, if you want to get in touch, my email address is richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can also head to the website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, where you can leave a comment or leave a voicemail. And finally, of course, you can find me on social media. Right, well, that is it for this week. Until next time, please take care.